In this episode, we explore the magic of Gene Hackman, the performances that defined him, the choices that set him apart, and the lasting impact of a man who never needed the spotlight, but owned it every time he stepped in front of the camera. So sit back, relax, and join us as we celebrate the one and only Gene Hackman.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff. And Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. If you're new, thank you so much for joining us. This is a really special, melancholy, bittersweet, but hopefully joyful episode that we've got on tap. Eric, right? This is a special guy.
Very, very special guy.
We've only done one other tribute episode for an actor, and that was Ray Liotta.
That's right. Yeah. We should do more of these, but yeah, because they're just going. So there's so many that are,
it's that time that we have feared in music. We've talked about it on our music episodes.
Yeah.
Is when those greats start to leave this earthly plane. But if you're joining us for the first time, there's a whole bunch of other stuff. There's great music and movie episodes also in the back room. So go tear through those when you're done here. We appreciate it. Go ahead and follow us too, because this way you know when new episodes come out. You get an automatic notification on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. It does the same thing. Liking it also helps us in the algorithm, helps us push us up to the front page of YouTube, where everybody can see these beautiful faces that we have with us tonight. Right?
As always.
Well, let's start. Yeah.
Yeah, they're wonderful people. The wonderful people. The goodest folk.
Becoming the movie crew. They were referred to recently to me as the movie crew. So I guess that's what we'll go with, the movie crew. And
by whom?
Someone. First up in the movie crew is Mr. Nick, the Professor Leshy.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome aboard, sir. Always,
thank you.
Always. Mr. Alamo Drafthouse.
They should pay me for all the plugs I put in for Alamo Drafthouse.
He's always there. He's going to films that he doesn't even know what it is. He goes to mystery films and hopes
Those are the best when you don't know, just watching it unfold. And if it's a movie I've never seen before, that's the way to see it for the first time. Hopefully, no teasers, no trailers, no clues.
He hopes that it's not a Garfield with Bill Murray voicing it. Next up, Ms. Christy Cuomo. Welcome aboard. Glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here. Sad to be talking about
sad to
Gene
be
Hackman.
Sad to be here.
Happy to be here.
Well, I mean, I'm not sad to be talking about Gene Hackman, but because of his death.
I don't want to steal the name of another podcast, Happy, Sad, Confused, but I think that's how we all feel.
I am happy, sad, and confused. Thank you. Very good.
That's pretty much me day to day. Last up, and because it's in no certain order, Mr. Sean Grady also, who has, I think, has the record. He binged how many Gene Hackman films did you say you watched?
12 and a half.
Wow.
A half?
That's
you can stay awake?
No, well, I didn't get it in before the podcast.
You only got halfway through Ants.
I had to go. Yeah, I had to cook dinner. So
Ants is a good one.
Yeah.
So Sean holds the record for really trying to dial in and get up to speed with Mr. Gene Hackman.
And unfortunately, Sean is also now unemployed. So anyone listening to the podcast,
I haven't gone to work.
Please, we're starting a GoFundMe for Sean so he could continue watching Gene Hackman films, finish that half.
On the screen.
We're going to raise money so he could finish the whole filmography of Gene Hackman.
There's like 70 plus films, right? Something like that.
A lot.
The dude was prolific.
Yeah.
Non-stop.
The thing about Gene Hackman is I think we can say off the bat that he's an actor's actor. He's always willing to work. And I wrote down in my notes, but we're gonna go through some factual stuff. But the guy could play almost anything. Like, he really vacillated between good guy roles, but he could play the smarmy villain just as easily. Like, he really could go in between and you bought it each way as the all-American kind of just everyman guy, but then someone who had really nasty ulterior motives as well. And that's kind of, it's a lot of actors get pigeonholed, especially back then. They were, this person is always this, and they're good for this type of role, and they play this type of character. And like I said, Gene Hackman just kind of was always under the radar and just kind of doing all these small films, and then he'd bubble up with something big, and then he'd just go back to working his craft, which I that might be a lost art, but because the movie business is so different anyway nowadays, it's kind of he's from that second golden generation of actors, and that's kind of a lost era, Eric, right? It doesn't really exist anymore.
No. Yeah, I mean, he's the kind of guy that, even if you didn't know him even back then, how many films he made or whatever, it's just always a pleasure to see his face. Yeah. Oh, he's in this? Okay. Yeah. I mean, even if the movie's not that great, it was always that much better because Gene Hackman had to be in it. Yeah. Happened to be in it. And he was just, he was just that kind of actor. And like you say, very prolific, very, he was just, I don't know, just like the character, the ultimate character actor in my book, and there's quite a few. But yeah, he's going to be sadly missed, man. I'm tearing up here. I'm sorry. I'm getting emotional.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
Yeah, it's just, to see this caliber of talent go is a hard thing. It's always a hard thing. So yeah.
And before we go any further, let me give you some stats about Mr. Gene Hackman. Just some interesting things as well. He was born in 1930. Eugene Allen Hackman was born January 30th, 1930 in San Bernardino, California. He's a California guy. Two-time Oscar winner. His first one was 1971. He won for the French Connection, Best Actor. And then he would have to wait 21 years for Oscar Gold again for Best Supporting Actor. So, you know what? If you're an actor, you can't really do much better than Best Actor and Best Supporting Actor. I mean,
right.
Unless you're behind the camera, that's it for you. He won that for Unforgiven. He co-wrote 3 novels, 3 historical novels, and he wrote 2 novels on his own, 2 solo novels. And all this happened after he retired, actually. His big breakthrough role was 1970. I Never Sang for My Father. He did get an Oscar nomination for that. Although, if you go back 3 years, Bonnie and Clyde might have been the introduction of Gene Hackman. But his breakthrough role was that. Gene Hackman has an asteroid named after him. Asteroid 55397 Hackman is named after Gene Hackman. It was discovered in, I think, 2001 or somewhere around there. So he's got an asteroid named after him. When he was a young actor, but he was never really a young actor because he didn't get big until he was in his 30s easily. So I'm using the term young loosely. But when he was a young actor, he shared an apartment with Robert Duvall and Dustin Hoffman. The 3 of them were living in New York, and in one form or another, 2 of them would be living in one apartment or another. And then Gene Hackman finally got to work with Dustin Hoffman in his second to last film, Runaway Jury. Yeah. So he got to work with his former roommate.
And they were all labeled as the ones that will not make it. Somebody said that to both Dustin Hoffman and Gene Hackman. There's like, you guys aren't, you're not cut out for this. You're
find something else to do.
Yeah, right. Well, there you go.
Find something else to do. So, so what I thought we would do for this episode is each one of us were tasked to do 2 things. One is to come up with one of our favorite roles, film roles from Gene Hackman, and each one of us is going to get to talk a little bit about that, why we picked it, why we love it, and maybe a favorite scene or 2. And then I figured it would be fun to also grab a second round of just a role that we just think is a fun Gene Hackman role, either where we think he's having fun or something that we enjoy watching that he's just kind of, letting loose a little bit. With his big filmography, there's not a whole lot of it. The guy did a lot of dramatic stuff. He didn't kind of start letting stuff out or letting the line out a little bit until later in his life. Then he started doing, I was looking at his filmography, towards the end, he started doing more comedic stuff and just kind of really, I think, letting himself have fun. But we're picking roles that we think he had fun with. So, Nick, did you have something?
Nope. I was just scratching my eyeball.
Okay.
Wiping away a tear.
It was my peripheral vision. I thought you raised your hand because I'm looking at the camera and you're over here.
No worries.
I saw something like that. So, yeah, let's get it rolling. Because I think we have a lot to get to, but we want to go through it. Everybody had their could pick whatever they wanted. So it was whatever connected with them, and some of us have doubled up, and some of us have picked the same thing. So we'll team up when we come to those. But we're going to go in chronological order. This way we can kind of walk you through, and in between, I may throw in just a couple of notable films just to walk us to the next one if it's appropriate, stuff that he's done. But actually, Eric is gonna kick us off with his Oscar-winning role, 1971.
Yeah, I mean,
Connection. Why did you pick it?
Well, I to me, it all starts here. This was the role that defined him. And yeah, he got nominated for, I Never Sang for My Father, or, he was, the really standout role in Bonnie and Clyde as the older brother. But he was always sort of pigeonholed as sort of a very passive type of actor, very sort of in the room, lots of dialogue scenes and that kind of thing. Here, it was a totally different experience. I mean, he was nobody's first choice for this role of this tough cop. It was based on real, two real cops. I mean, this is a true story, basically. And the guy that he's based on is like, he thought he was a powder puff. This was like, this guy can't play me. I want Paul Newman. I want Rod Taylor. I want Steve McQueen. The producer of the film, they pitched it to Steve McQueen, and he didn't want it because they had worked on Bullet together. So Hackman was interested, and then William Friedkin, the director, and Philip D'Antoni, they met with him and they liked him from the start. But they felt that, he's going to need a lot of work because I don't think he knows what he's getting himself into. And he didn't. First week, the second day, he was filming the famous, pick your feet in Poughkeepsie scene, chasing the dude, in the alley in the Santa suit. And he couldn't do it. He's like, the level of violence, the level that he just thought this guy that he's playing is a monster. I can't do it. I am not like this guy at all. And he's a racist. He's this, he's that. Friedkin was just like, production has started. You're going to put me in a bind if you leave, So the answer was for Hackman and Roy Scheider, who played his partner, to go around with Eddie Egan and Sonny Grasso, the real life detectives. They took them everywhere. They were on ride-alongs. They went on drug busts. They went into bars. That's all the scenes that you see in this film are real, are actually happened. Were based on real things that these two did. They even had Hackman and Scheider get out of the car and do the scene with real suspected drug dealers, and I want you to fuck with these guys. I want you to get out there and do the pick, get out there and do the pick, and they did it. And they thought Hackman was nuts. They didn't know who he was, but they thought he was fucking crazy. But that's what he needed to really give this kind of performance. And of course, Roy Scheider would go on to say in his commentary on the Blu-ray, he was like, I started feeling left out because he would always go off to lunch with William Friedkin. And it was more or less just bitch sessions of Hackman trying to talk. There's got to be a way that I can convey to the audience that this guy is in such a prick, And Friedkin's like, no, let it go. He is who he is. This is what we need. And he had such a particular vision for the role, and Hackman was forever grateful. And I'm convinced that the Oscar was won with sweat and tears, and it just, it was a hell of a performance. Sure. I mean, all the rage, all the angst, all of the adrenaline, that this film offers. Hackman, it's all in Hackman's face, the car chase. I mean, it's, I'm convinced that half the stuff that you see on screen is real. It's not even acting. It's because he was so angry and Friedkin, he was very infamous for putting that kind of tension on the set and he wouldn't goad people. He would just, so Hackman was, kind of left out in the cold there a little bit, and but he earned his stripes. And by the end of it, Egan's like, he's more me than me, he's like, yeah, this fucking guy, because he thought he was a powder puff and he was busting his balls the whole time. But man, he earned it. And ever since then, he was been known to say that he's been forever grateful for the experience. I don't think he could have played half the roles in his career that he plays had it not been for this.
Yeah. It sounds like it was his birth trial by fire.
Absolutely. Yeah.
As an actor of kind of leveling up.
I watched this film 3 times over the past few days, and I can't get enough of it. I'm just, wow. And I had seen it, of course, but it's just, yeah. But yeah, so that's
one of them. Sean, was this one of the 12 that you saw?
Yes.
Do you have anything you want to throw in?
No, it's Eric covered a lot of it. What I was listening to William Friedkin. I happened to catch something on YouTube where he was talking about that obviously Hackman wasn't the first choice, but did you hear, Eric? Jimmy Breslin was very close to getting this role.
Yes. They wanted him. They offered it to Peter Boyle. Peter Boyle turned it down because he did that film Joe. But Jimmy Breslin, Jackie Gleason was considered.
Jackie Gleason was their first choice
because they looked like Eddie Egan. Eddie Egan's a big burly guy. He's like Irish, and they just wanted him just for the looks. But Breslin couldn't act his way out of a paper bag, apparently. So
no,
and he didn't drive either. That was another thing. He's like, he couldn't drive. He's like, his mother took him.
That's how he got fired.
Yeah. So, yeah.
All right. Well, there you go. In a weird footnote, didn't Ed O'Neill play Popeye Doyle? Was it a TV series or another film?
I think it was a
pilot.
I think it was TV.
Yeah,
it was a made-for-TV thing, right? Where
He
they
did
Popeye Doyle, it was called, or something like that.
I think it was supposed to be a series. The pilot got filmed, and then I think it got scrapped.
Yeah.
And that was an opportunity to kind of get inside the guy's head, which this movie doesn't really offer much of.
Yeah.
It's not that kind of film. Freaking wanted it's a man obsessed. That is the theme of the movie. That's what they did. That's what Hackman delivered. And it's just a tour de force performance. Yeah.
Oscar gold.
Yeah, absolutely. So. Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to 1972, which kind of, if you were around in the mid 70s, there was a subgenre of films that really came to the forefront, the disaster film. Really, in the mid 70s was a genre unto itself, with massive casts of literally you had people like Paul Newman and all types of people, Charlton Heston, everybody would be in these massive casts. And Nick Leshy chose 1972. We're only going to jump 1 year, The Poseidon Adventure with Gene Hackman. Nick, why did you pick that?
I just remember seeing it a lot with my family. It was on TV a lot when I was a kid, and it was like an all-star cast. So it was like all these, Red Skelton and Roddy McDowell and Shelley Winters. Like you said, all-star cast, which were part of that genre about the disaster films. It started out with Airport, that airplane disaster film with an all-star cast, and this was one of those early ones. This is one of the early ones that started that genre. And then right after that, Irwin Allen, who produced this one, did Towering Inferno, a bunch of them. But this was Earthquake was another one. But it was like, take this disaster movie, so it was like a soap opera. Take as many characters as you can, and put like name stars in each role. So I mean, that had really not been done for this kind of genre. Like you had movies where it's like, people trying to survive and things like that. But this was like, it's something going on that's major. And Gene Hackman in this case plays the lead. He's the, if you can call it a lead in an ensemble, movie like that. Yeah. But he was this reverend who, they're all great characters, like interesting dynamics. And he was going, everybody's on this, it's the last voyage of USS Poseidon, and it's going from New York to Greece, and a bunch of characters are on, they have different motives for where they're going. And Gene Hackman's character, he plays Reverend Scott, who's a preacher, and he has not been doing very well. Like, he's had some unorthodox ideas. So they're kind of sending him off to Africa, and Greece was going to be his pit stop. And, he starts off the movie by like, telling everybody, it's like, God helps those who help themselves, kind of, which ends up being very, very prophetic and foreshadowing, because then, there's there's a underwater earthquake that causes this this tidal wave that just capsizes the ship. So the ship is upside down. And that's the premise. So a bunch of them decide to, after you see some horrific deaths and people hanging from the Christmas tree, upside down. And so he says, hey, we have to go to the hull. So he becomes this leader that takes this group of people to find the hull, which they think is, going to be the closest to the, where people might find you. And everybody else is like, nope, we're going to stay here and be rescued. And then that becomes the story where, they go and they have to go through this, like, bunch of explosions happening. But then at the very end, spoiler alert, it's, almost 50 years old, this movie, right? But he tried, Shelley Winters sacrifices herself, trying to say, people die crazy deaths.
Yeah.
And he has to kind of turn the wheel, because there's this like steam coming that's blocking their path to where they need to go. So he sacrifices himself. But in that moment, he has one of the best monologues in movies, I think, where like he screams at God, it's like, so it's a 180 turn from what he was saying at the beginning, was like, God helps those who help themselves. And he's kind of saying like, why can't you help us? Like, all these people that have given their lives. And so it's really a great dramatic scene. It's the kind of movie that people think is like, it's hokey and, cheesy kind of, but I love it. I think it's one of the best. And it often is ranked like one of the best, kind of hokey, cheesy movies. Right. Yeah. So I love it.
Yeah. But his performance in it really, like I said before, like solid. And when the scene with Shelley Winters, like he's cradling her in his arms, that's the scene that always gets me. It's like, why this woman? And Hackman delivers that, but very melodramatic perforence. But it's just,
No, Shelley got nominated for an Oscar. She didn't win that one, but she won the Golden Globe that year. And Gene Hackman, he didn't get nominated for this one, but he got nominated and won the British Academy Award for the role.
The best.
So it was a good performance.
Yeah, that final scene when he's turning the wheel and he's saying, "You've killed all these other people. Take me. Like, if you need somebody, take me." And then it kind of, So just to fill out Nick's pick, you have Gene Hackman, Ernest Borgnine, Red Buttons, Carol Lindley, Roddy McDowell, Stella Stevens, Shelley Winters, Jack Albertson, Pamela Sue Martin, Leslie Nielsen.
He's great as the captain.
Yeah.
That's literally a who's who of like 19. Like, these people all were probably on the Love Boat.
And I remember the posters of these movies, right? You see every single actor pictured on
little circle with their face.
Right.
Every headshot along the side down the side of the poster.
In the dramatic pose, like, ooh, you're like they're making the faces, like,
sweaty.
Yeah.
Nick, probably we're similar ages, so I also watched that movie a ton when I was a kid, and I love it as much. Did you happen to read the op-ed piece in the New York Times with Ben Stiller?
No.
So when he was working on the Royal Tenenbaums, he was so nervous, and he working with Gene Hackman because he was like one of his heroes. And he's like sitting next to him one day, and he doesn't know how to bring it up, and he wants to tell him like how much this one film impacted him, like as a child, and like really inspired him. And it's the Poseidon Adventure. And so he's like gearing up, and he says it to Gene Hackman, and Gene Hackman like turns to him, and I forgot exactly what he said, but it was something to the effect of, he just looks at him and he goes, "Money film." Something. and that was it. That was like so it was like Gene Hackman did, and there's it alluded to, or I read somewhere else that he did films either specifically for the money, like Superman was a money film, or he did it because like he really felt like like Unforgiven, he did because of Clint Eastwood and everything else. But yeah, so if you should probably read it. It's a short op-ed.
I'll definitely hunt it down. That totally sounds like something he would say.
It was like the Sunday after he passed or something. Ben Stiller wrote it.
But that's the thing with him. Like, he doesn't play things half-assed, right? Like, I would be hard pressed to kind of pick a movie where he kind of just phoned it in. Like
Yeah.
No, he
even if he was
doesn't call
doing it for the
anything in.
money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that too. It even though he's taking jobs for pay, he's working for that pay. I think he understands that because he's an actor. He's a working actor. He loved being an actor.
Yeah.
So yeah, that this was a money job, but I get to act. Sean,
I saw. I guess they were looking to make. Did they make a Poseidon Adventure too?
they did.
They
Okay.
did,
It's called The Next
but
Day.
I
and a
didn't see
remake.
it.
So
Yeah.
they said to Hackman that they wanted him to do it, and he said he knew it was bad that a helicopter was going to show up with him looking out and saying, "Did my brother survive?" And he was like, "I knew that was the
City Slickers.
Yeah,
Barely. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
And
that's
Jack
one way to
Palance
go.
has no shame.
he wasn't going to do
That's
that
so
one for the
funny.
money."
his brother too. You know what? Let's kick it over to Sean because Sean's pick would be 2 years later.
Yeah.
A film directed by Francis Ford Coppola that at the time wasn't well received, but now it had a 50-year fuse on it because now it is looked back on as a noir classic, a slow burn of a film, and one of Coppola's best. And Sean, you picked The Conversation from 1974. Why did you pick that?
I did.
Besides Harrison Ford.
Well, that's one of the main reasons I like Harrison Ford. But my buddy Pete had said that was his favorite movie, and I remember I watched it later, like in my life, and then when we were doing this, I'm like, I want to revisit that. I remember really liking it. I want to see how it lands now when I'm older, and it's a different role for Gene Hackman. First of all, he looks about 20 years older than he was at the time.
Mm.
I think he was only like in his mid 40s. He looks like he could be a guy in his 60s. He's this surveillance expert. And it opens up. I like the way it opens up on this couple having a conversation, and they're trying to get. And all the technology is, I guess, high tech for the time, but very primitive now. When you look at it, it's like they're trying to zone in and walking past. It's Cindy Williams, Shirley.
Shirley. Yeah.
Surely.
Yeah. And they're having this conversation. They're like trying to figure out what they say, and it's based on one line that he misinterprets, which is really cool. He'd kill us if he had the chance, and then the emphasis is on a different word. I just like his character throughout. You can see that he's starting to question what he does for a living. He never really questioned it before. I like a hired gun, go in, get what we need to get. You sell it, you get paid, you move on. But this particular case seems to really trouble him, and Harrison Ford's in it. And Harrison Ford is I like that role for Harrison Ford. It's pre everything, so it's like a different look at Harrison Ford. It's got Robert Duvall, which is great, and
Buddy,
yeah, and there's a lot of scenes where he's very vulnerable. I feel like it's not your typical Hackman role. When I think of Gene Hackman, I think, it's like you said, he could be this brash bad guy, a villain. And this one, he was kind of like a troubled guy and just, vulnerable. And I was listening to some Hackman interviews, and he said he enjoyed those type of characters. Although this is a great performance, he felt that it was more or less brought out of him by Coppola. Mm. Whereas like Friedkin in the French Connection, I think he referred to him almost like an uncle that kind of just allowed him to, do what he needed to do and not necessarily tell him what to do. So I think this is a performance that Coppola got out of him, Hackman's words. And I just think that it's not like I like the bad guy Gene Hackman. I actually prefer those roles for him. But I like this role. I like this because I think it's different.
Yeah,
and I think that it's a great film, and it's funny how, like you said, a slow burn 50 years later, where this was written before Watergate, and it comes out right around the same time. So like the timing is just crazy for that. I couldn't imagine.
It's about surveillance, right, and audio surveillance and spying on people and listening in.
What people were thinking when this came out in the 70s. I mean, I was just born, so I obviously didn't know. So I just think it's just I feel like even though like the stuff is primitive, like I think the ideas behind it are still
Oh, it's
still
definitely of its time
resonant.
for sure. But man, what a time, like just the conspiracy stuff. I mean, 70s cinema as a whole, I think is just such a great time, such a great decade.
You got John
Yeah,
Cazale.
that had a different 70s cinema.
Yeah.
Had a different look. It had a gritty.
This was the new Hollywood. These guys were taking risks.
Yeah.
These were they weren't afraid to tell these kinds of stories. And yeah, you're right. Hackman's performance in this, he's very sort of like introverted and but he knows his shit, right? He's just like he's trying to like convey that to people in the film, like friends. He's telling them all about the equipment, and people don't give a shit. Like he's like he's like so proud of what he does, and yet he's like yeah. So
and I love the part when, like you said, he meets that guy at the convention. It's funny, they have this convention with all the latest, the latest in technology, and the guy, like, he had this vulnerable moment with, I guess she's a prostitute that they bring back,
right?
And the guy had recorded it because he gave him a pen, and you could tell, like, he was like, and he lets everybody hear that vulnerable moment, and he's like, he's so mad that everybody, it's not that it's partially because he was tricked, because he fell for it, but also because everybody got to see a piece of him that he probably didn't want it,
and his own stuff was turned on him. How does it feel to be surveilled?
Right, exactly.
Right? How does it feel to do what you're doing to other people? So
I think it's a great performance.
Great choice. Side note, Harrison Ford and Cindy Williams would, of course, be poached by Mr. George Lucas for a little film called American Graffiti, not a year or so later. So him and, and then if Harrison Ford would show his face again for Coppola in Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, that's right.
So, he was,
Peter Boyle's in the conversation as well. Yeah. So there's that as well. And they both would, of course, be in Young Frankenstein together, and that.
There's my segue. I was going to say, as we leap forward, the same year he had a cameo, which was Eric's first choice. Was going to be his cameo as the blind hermit.
But I had picked that in our cameo episode,
Young Frankenstein,
right? And it's such a delicious scene.
Yeah,
He's
and we'll end up doing Young Frankenstein, so we'll get to talk about that more. So he, Gene Hackman would move through the 70s. I mean, some years having 3 and 4 films out in the same year. Of course, 1978 would be a breakthrough for him with Superman, his portrayal of Lex Luthor. He was in Reds with Warren Beatty, that epic film as well. And then we're gonna skip forward to 1986, where two of us, Christy and I, both picked Hoosiers as our pick. So, Christy, why Hoosiers for you?
When you presented this, it was not a small task to actually pick a Gene Hackman film to talk about. I went through French Connection, The Conversation, which I've seen multiple times, and it's definitely worthy. Bonnie and Clyde, I had a really hard time picking one, and I will tell you honestly, because we're doing it in March, and it's March Madness, I was like, it makes sense to do Hoosiers. I was like, well, that's how I'm going to pick it. That's just how I'm going to do it, because it's really difficult to just pick one Gene Hackman movie, because he like we were saying during with Nick with the Poseidon Adventures, he never called it in. So even if it was an odd role for him, the thing about Gene Hackman is Gene Hackman was always good at what he was doing. Like he's just a really good actor. And you never can tell he's acting, which is you get lost in his performance. So regardless of what it is, it's Gene Hackman. So I picked Hoosiers. It's just a good movie. I was sad because I didn't know like some of the backstory with it. Like Hackman, he was such a pain in the ass on the set. he tried to get the direct, like, I don't know how much of it's true, but he went and like before they started filming, like he was great, fun, blah, blah, blah. And the director's like, as soon as we started filming, it was like a completely different person. And Gene Hackman like tried to get the director fired, and they like had to pull him aside and like, we're not firing him. And then, and I read a lot of this after I'd watched it. The scene where him and Hopper are on the bench during one of the games and they're talking, like it shows them, and Hopper's laughing. It's because Dennis Hopper said it was because Gene Hackman turned to him and said, "Hopper, I hope you invested a lot of money because this is going to be the end of our careers," which was the complete opposite, by the way. But so I was kind of sad that but we had another film we spoke about, and I forgot what it was, and they didn't know how good it was. Do you remember which film it was? Oh God, I'd have to go back. But yes, it's like the scene where he's in the gymnasium when he introduces the team, and they're all calling for Jimmy and everything, and then he walks back out and he says, "This is your team.
Yeah.
These boys are working hard for you. They're putting everything on the line for you." Like that's like a really powerful scene. Like, it's just a really good scene, and I think it encompasses a lot of just Gene Hackman, in that one scene. He could just be very subtle. Like even when he goes and he helps what's her name's mother put the I don't know if
the grain in the back of the truck
or whatever in the truck, where it's just so natural for him. Like you just really feel like he's just a guy living in this small town, and he's just gonna walk by and do it. I don't know. It's a really good sports film.
That too. Like, it's considered one of the best sports films. Actually,
it is one of the best sports films, and like you can see how like Rudy and some of these other Remember the Titans or these feel good movies really that really center around young athletes on teams. A lot probably was taken from Hoosiers. Like it really does set a stage, I think, for those a lot of those future films. Even though I don't think Rudy was that far after. When did Rudy come out?
Early 90s, I think. Right?
Was it early 90s?
It wasn't 80s. I think it was early 90s.
Yeah.
For me, Hoosiers for me was my introduction to Gene Hackman as an actor. Like I'd known him as Lex Luthor, and the name Gene Hackman was always around. But I don't know if Hoosiers used to be on like HBO all the time, and maybe I caught some of it at someone's house, and then I just had a memory just now, literally just had a memory now. I think McDonald's was selling, like if you bought a Happy Meal, you could get Hoosiers, Dances with Wolves, or some other food for like $5.
And Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. I work there.
You're right.
That is absolutely correct.
You're right.
It was like you could get a VHS for like $5 of Dances with Wolves, Hoosiers, or something else, and I got Hoosiers. And I watched the shit out of that film, and what I wrote down is what makes Hoosiers special is it's a small film with small performances. Like Christy said, this is a film that's in no hurry to get anywhere. It's also a stranger in a strange land story, right? This is a guy who's brash, a city guy, coming into a very closed off small town where everybody knows everything and everybody has particular opinions. In this case, the opinions are about basketball. Everybody has strong opinions about basketball and how this team should be run and how someone should conduct themselves. So what the film is it's a slow burn of how he slowly learns to slow down and acclimates to this thing. And one scene in particular, or two scenes that match up, is in the very beginning during their first game before the team plays. There's a priest and he says a little prayer. So all the players bow their heads, but Gene Hackman doesn't. He's just not into that. Like he's just kind of like, that's fine. You do your thing. But then at the very last game, the championship game, and the priest comes in, he is now bowing his head and praying with these people. Like he has kind of understood that there's more to the game than just the game. That these guys, and he says, which is very tight. And at that point, he says, "I love you guys." So he really kind of creates a relationship with them, understands that how much basketball means to these kids. For some, it's a way of life. And Dennis Hopper says it. Sometimes this is the best thing that's ever going to happen to them. Even Gene Hackman says it to Barbara Hershey. It's like, some people would kill just to be treated like a god, even for a little bit of time. So always loved Hoosiers because and yeah, Dennis Hopper. We could have a whole episode just about his performance as Shooter. He's just a great counterpoint to Gene Hackman, because Gene Hackman really has to keep it reined in, and Dennis Hopper kind of gets to have all the fun. So, so yeah. Anybody else want to kick in anything?
It's so unusual to see Dennis Hopper in such like sort of this wholesome type of feel good type of movie too. He's always been a little on the edge, So it's such a great, it's a testament to these guys that they were more than what people said they were, and that kind of thing. So yeah, but yeah, great choice, great film.
Sean?
I will say it's the first time I ever saw it was.
Oh, really?
A couple, and the Poseidon Adventure as well. Those are first times. Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
That was,
yeah.
So what about Hoosiers?
I really liked it. I definitely, when I was hearing the music, I hearkened back to the Remember the Titans movie and how that music was used in that one to build the moments and to build the drama. I found myself, I was Googling, like, I'm like, is this the same guy with the same music?
Harry Goldsmith.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. But I enjoyed it, and I was happy to be able to see it finally. I'm like, I was way late to the game with that one. That one I should have taken care of, long ago. But that's what was great about this episode. I was revisiting movies I hadn't seen and watching movies that I had never seen. So
yeah, for me, I think the last word for me on Hoosiers is it's Gene Hackman comfort food.
Yeah,
because like I said, it's a small role, but he's in almost every scene. Like, he is the lead, and he's in almost every scene, but I think two. And those are the scenes where Dennis Hopper is taking over things. But he's got to carry that film. Christy, What do you got before we?
The other scene in the movie that I thought was really powerful was when Dennis Hopper's son, he's when he's hurt, he's in the game and he's bleeding, and he's like, "You just go out there and play. You win. We're gonna win." And then it cuts back to Gene Hackman, and he's he's acting with just his face, and then he's back of his head because he knows it's the wrong move for the kid. Like, he knows it's not right. Like, it's not about winning. And then when he pulls him and tells him to sit on the bench, like, that's just a really well acted scene. And there's not a lot of dialogue, in the best parts of it. It's just, and that's Gene Hackman. Like, he was just so fucking good.
Yeah,
really.
Best supporting actor in that film is that little black folio that Gene Hackman has throughout. He keeps slapping. It's like you never see what's in it, but he's like holding it up, like I believe in it, and that's
hands it off to
hands it over to Shooter. And, that little folio, we never find out. It's almost like the suitcase in Pulp Fiction. Like, we never find out exactly what's in there. Why?
What that is, Dean, is that's the letter that he's going to hand to his agent to fire him because he thinks this is a shit film. Yeah. So after it.
Get me out of this contract. All right, that's going to cover it for the, we'll put it in air quotes, the serious picks that we've chosen for Mr. Gene Hackman. And now we're going to turn over into some of the stuff that we really just like, the fun stuff that we enjoy watching Gene Hackman do. And whether it's a role that is outside of what you normally think, or whether it's a scene chewing Gene Hackman or a snarling, oily, snaky Gene Hackman, I think this is where we get to have a little fun with it, and we're going to go in chronological order again. So this time we're going to start off with Mr. Nick Leshy in a film from 1980, which is a sequel. And he didn't really do sequels at this time because there was a French Connection 2, and he didn't have anything to do with that. And there was a Poseidon Adventure 2, and he passed on that as well. But this time, he decided to come back for more, and that film was Superman 2.
He was in the French Connection too.
Oh, he was? Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
But I didn't see it. So I was going to watch it.
So it doesn't count.
No, it does not count.
If Eric or Sean didn't watch it,
but he and the bad guy were the only two that returned for that. So, but anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Correct. No, that's okay. That's okay. So Sean, Nick, Superman 2.
Yeah, he's very well known for Lex Luthor in Superman the movie, which is a classic film. So I would lump that one as like one of his greats, obviously. But then Superman 2, he's kind of a secondary villain because you have the three big villains from Krypton that come out of the Phantom Zone, and they start, they have the same powers as Superman. And it's a lot of people look back at that. Superman 2 is probably one of the best superhero movies that has a lot of the tropes that you see in all these Marvel movies and DC movies nowadays. Just superheroes battling supervillains. I mean, in the first movie, Lex Luthor is just a guy with, in the comics, he's super, super smart, right? But here he still is like, it's comedic. It's funny. Like, you talked about, he could play heroes and villains. He could also do drama and comedy, like later in his career. Like, these were the kind of roles. And I think Lex Luthor really put him over the top, where people were like, wow, the guy is funny, genuinely funny.
Versatile.
Yeah. So in this movie, these were shot back to back. They did Superman 1 and then they were doing Superman 2, and it was Richard Donner. And, behind the scenes, this movie was a mess. I mean, they Donner left, and contractually, and so Lester comes in, but a lot of the Hackman scenes were done with Donner, and they were complete. And then there was a lot of the cast wasn't very happy with working with Lester and shifting directors, but you don't see that on the film. Like, I've seen the theatrical cut, I've seen the Donner cut, and through it all, Hackman is just consistently hilarious and funny, and he's a great foil. And those of you who haven't seen it, again, spoiler alert, right? At the very end, he's the pivotal moment where, Superman, he had given up his powers because he fell in love with Lois Lane and wanted to become fully human, and just abandon being a superhero and just fall in love. But you got these supervillains that are now destroying the world. They take over the White House. They're like destroying all these iconic, landmarks. And Luthor is the one that, plot hole, he finds, after he escapes prison, he finds the Fortress of Solitude and learns about Jor-El and where Superman came from. So he tells the villains, well, I can lead you to the son of Jor-El, right? So, and they're like, at first they're about to kill him, but they're like, all right, what do you want? I want Australia. It's like the real estate then carries over from the first movie. So they're like, all right, we'll give him Australia. But at the end, he's the one that, like, Superman confides in him. He's like, listen, if we could get him into that chamber, it'll take away their powers. And he betrays Superman. He's like, look, you put him in there, he's going to lose. And Superman knew all along that he was going to betray him. So that's the twist. And I always say, what if he underestimated Lex Luthor? What if Lex Luthor was like, okay,
that's why
it would have been a different movie.
He knows that he's pure evil, so he knew that little twist ending he knew he would sell him out in a second he'll sell out Superman because he hates him so much.
Yeah.
Right? Because he's such pure good.
Yeah.
That he would sell him out. And even I think you can link Superman and Superman 2, because like I said, they were filmed at the same time, so you're basically getting one continuous performance from that. And with Hackman working with Ned Beatty and Valerie Perrine as like his henchmen and Otis. Just there's that slow burn comedic thing with how inept Ned Beatty is, and Lex Luthor is besieged by idiots. He's the smartest man. He's got the plan, but he got people that can't get things done for him. So that always adds another layer to like the frustration of like the evil genius.
Yeah.
Who needs people to get things done but can't get the right, it's Otis. Otisville. Right? When he wrote on the map and so we're like Otis, he's like, what is this?
It's that deadpan like type of humor that you love. Like he's the dry, but it's funny as shit. And he was such a trooper that, when he knew when he signed on to do the film, he goes, I'm not shaving my head. Yes. I refused to do that. And so they actually combed his hair in ways to make it look like he's wearing a toupee in a lot of the scenes. Like he says, he's got that wavy hair and it was long at the time. So they would comb it in a certain way so it looked fake, and it was his real hair. So
and the more I watch the first one, it's like that becomes a running joke because you see the toupees all over his lair. It was like,
it was him having fun. Again, it's nice to see actors let that out a little bit. I think they need that outlet. I think it's important for them to realize that too. Sometimes you take yourself a little too seriously, but then when you have that outlet, you kind of release that other side of you. You kind of get it out of your system almost, and you kind of and then he would return to he would pretty much after Superman, he pretty much returned to like straight up dramas. Like he did Loose Cannons in 1990. I think that was with Dan Aykroyd. So there was a couple of
he skipped Superman 3, but then he did Superman 4, which is better left untalked about.
Yeah.
better left unsaid. So
It's actually referenced when Superman 4, because he was so worried about Hoosiers ending his career and being the worst movie. And Superman 4 is probably considered one of the worst films ever made.
It is really bad. Well,
Not
the budget,
Hoosiers.
it was like not a non-existent budget.
And it wasn't,
it
it was Canon. It wasn't even Warner Brothers. They didn't even want to do it. I mean, Canon did Masters of the Universe and
it was
all
just
those like really, cheesy.
slapdash.
Yeah.
But again, a testament to Gene Hackman, because the Superman movies and the Poseidon Adventure, he considered these money movies, or being on Hoosiers and thinking it was a flop and it wasn't good, and hating every moment of the filming. And yet he never called any of the performances in.
Yeah. Yep.
And that says a lot about a man's character.
He was a worker.
Or a person's character.
Which leads us to the next guilty pleasure film, or however we want to call it. So if we skip ahead, like we said, 1992, Hackman returned to the Western genre. He won Best Supporting Actor for his role as Little Bill in Unforgiven. He would do another Western 2 years later, Wyatt Earp. He would play Nicholas Earp. He would play father of the Earps. He wasn't in it that much, but he did another Western. Then we get to my guilty pleasure, 1995. He did another Western. At the time, Sam Raimi was not a big name director. He was still very niche. And he did a film which I saw in the theater at the time, and I loved it. And this one is another one that at the time people hated it, and now they're looking back on it and they're like, oh, this was Sam Raimi. The Quick and the Dead, which was with Gene Hackman, Sharon Stone, a very unknown Russell Crowe, and a very young Leonardo DiCaprio.
Mm-hmm.
And this is almost like his character in this is John Herod. Okay, so if you take the biblical reference there, almost like Little Bill's psychotic cousin.
Yeah,
like that's really what he is in The Quick and the Dead. And with Raimi's hyperactive film style, this is what you get scene after scene of just kinetic energy, the zoom in close-ups fast on the eyes, the zoom outs, the Hitchcock pulled focus shots, just over the top gunplay, and Gene Hackman is in the middle of it as the snarling, sniveling, sleazy villain in this, and it's just he looks like he's licking his lips and licking his chops when he's saying these lines, because it's just that type of role. It's did anybody see it here? Anybody in the group see it? Christy did, and Eric did.
Oh yeah,
a number of times.
Safe to say that there was no ceiling in this role. Like he could go as he was allowed to go.
It's a great movie,
as big as he wanted to.
It's a really good movie. It's a very fun movie. And they're all so good in it. They really are.
Sharon Stone killed it.
Sharon Stone is amazing in this film.
Yeah,
it's probably one of my favorite performances of hers.
Mine too. This was a riff on the Man with No Name film. Her character has a name, but she's called Lady. She's got no name. She comes into town for a gun. There's a gunfighting tournament. So all the gunslingers from all around are coming, but she's got an agenda, and she's very much in the Clint Eastwood thing. Doesn't say a lot, not a lot to say, but at the top of the pecking order and the fastest draw is Gene Hackman. So I'll just end it with a quick one of my favorite scenes, and then we'll move on. Is again, we've got young Leonardo DiCaprio, like pencil thin Leonardo DiCaprio.
Like Growing Pains, Leonardo DiCaprio.
He was young, but you could see he had that glint in his eye. Like he was, you could tell he was going to be something. But there's a subplot of the film is DiCaprio supposedly Hackman's son. And Hackman doesn't really acknowledge it and takes every opportunity to kind of demean him and stuff like that. So Russell Crowe is another character. They need a gun for him, and DiCaprio sells guns. And so it's a nice scene between Hackman and DiCaprio where he needs to buy a gun for Russell Crowe, and DiCaprio showing him all the different guns, and Hackman is there. So it was nice to see like young Hollywood and a seasoned vet kind of spar. And then, like I said, Russell Crowe was in there before he was Russell Crowe, who turned out to be a monster actor as well. So it's a good guilty pleasure film. It's under 2 hours. It's got the Sam Raimi craziness to it. And if you know what that means, you'll enjoy it. So I would
argue that it's Kill Bill before Kill Bill. It's like it has that sort of like very over the top.
Yeah, it has that vibe.
That vibe of just really, if you can take it any, as ridiculous as you can, there it is. It's been a while since I've seen it. I didn't actually. I'd like to actually watch it now, but
Lance Henriksen as Ace Hanley.
Yeah, that's right.
It's another stacked.
I remember working at Suncoast, and I think it was when I was in Stamford, Dean, that this guy would come in. No, actually, it was when I moved to Florida. This guy would come in, and it was his all-time favorite movie. That's all he did was come in. Never bought it. I was like, hey, do you want the movie? I mean, I can hold it for you, whatever. He never fucking bought it, but he would just come in and he just like look at the film and, oh, look, you ever see this movie? That's Sharon Stone, boy. She's all right. And he would literally like fucking lay down on the floor and just like stare at this movie. Like as if he was, I'm like, dude, you got to get up. Okay.
He sounds like one of the milkmaids from Clerks.
Yeah. He was like,
down in the aisle.
No joke. Almost every day he'd come in and that's all he talked about was that movie. Yeah. Huh? And he's, yeah.
Eric, you're acting like that wasn't every Suncoast customer.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I mean, honestly,
true. But this guy,
we had a few in Yonkers.
If you've ever been to a Suncoast, you've been there.
If you've ever been to a Suncoast, there's a lot of people won't buy but talk.
So we're gonna skip forward to 2001, and then Gene Hackman would work with an auteur director, Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
For a film called Royal Tenenbaums, and that was Eric's pick. Eric, why did you pick Royal Tenenbaums?
I love that film. It's my favorite of Anderson's repertoire. He's not an easy guy. His movies are not exactly they're not all easy to watch. They're very acquired taste, I guess, you could say, but it's just there are just certain films that I really like. And the ones that I really like with him are the ones about family. In this case, a very dysfunctional family. Gene Hackman plays the heavy. He's the like the asshole dad. And, if you know the story of how his father left him when he was at such an early age, I'm not surprised that I actually am surprised that he actually took on this role. And I'm sure that must have been a sensitive thing. But the way that, Wes Anderson works, it's like he's very, very, very particular, very specific, like freaking, like just it's got a particular vision. Hackman just didn't get it. So, again, it was just one of those situations where he didn't get didn't quite have so much fun on this one. But like we've been saying, he did his job and he did it well. And for me, he grounds the movie. He's the only normal person. He's crazy. He's like wears these flamboyant clothes. He comes around. He wants to get back with his family after all this. He's a disbarred lawyer. He's got thrown out of the hotel that he's living in for like 20 years, and he's destitute. And now he thinks he's going to get back with the family by posing like he's got cancer. So they all take him in, and it just he's such a bastard in this, and yet it's heartfelt, it's human. You could tell he's got some real ulterior motives here. And by the end of the movie, that really comes into play. So the emotion lands in that sense. But just some of the scenes where he's like trying to get to know the grandkids, and that montage with Paul Simon, me and Julio down by the school, and like they're hanging on the back of the garbage truck, and they're like throwing, water balloons at taxis, and like stealing from a friggin' five and like the deli on the corner. Like he's like the kids are taking like cartons of milk, and he came out with just a bag of chips. They're stealing like big stuff, and he's got like this little bag of chips like this, and he's like laughing, and in those scenes you could definitely tell he's having fun. So it's hard to believe that he just, there was that amount of friction on it. You really couldn't tell in the performance. But my favorite scene, though, the scene that really gets me, that really kind of is what the movie's about, is the reveal that Danny Glover, who plays the love interest to Angelica Houston, is Hackman's ex-wife. Actually, they never got divorced officially. And he's thinking that he's going to reconnect with her as well. But Danny Glover is like the love interest, and he knows that he's full of shit. So he like exposes him to the family. And boy, what a scene that is. It's like he's literally walking down the stairs, and he interacts with every member of the family as he's walking down the stairs. Ben Stiller starts out, he calls the cab, and doesn't, he go, and then he tells him, he's like, you better be good with these two, because you don't want the same thing to happen, to you, like this thing. If you're too hard on them, you're gonna end up without whatever. The relationship's gonna fall. And he's just like, kind of fuck you. And then he deals with his wife, and she's like, I was hoping to keep the status quo. And she's like, you're a bastard. Goodbye. And then he deals with the old, with Luke Wilson, who plays Richie. And he's like, yeah, these last 6 weeks, it's been so great. I feel so, it was so great to reconnect. He's like, and it's like, the whole like being sick. And he's like, yeah, but Dad, you weren't dying. And he's like, but I'm going to live. And that got me, like that, just like, whoa. It's like with every interaction with these, it's like a punch in the face, like a punch in the gut. And then he deals with Margot, with Gwyneth Paltrow, who's an adopted daughter. He never really and he always would introduce her as, this is my adoptive daughter. Like, he never really cared about her as much as, and he, Danny Glover at this point is like on the stoop with her, and she's smoking, and he's like, he's not your father. And then she turns around and says, neither are you. I was like, oh, and it's like, it's one gun punch after another, man. It gets you. And then, but the final stroke is Pagoda, who is this Indian actor that's in a lot of his films. He's like a reoccurring, character actor that appears in all his movies. And apparently, is this story he's telling his grandkids that he was an assassin, because there was a hit on him at one point, and he got stabbed by this guy. So he brought him over to America to be his butler or his servant. And he's serving the family. And the guy literally pulls out a pocket knife and stabs him. And it's like, you're already feeling like this is like, you're getting beaten up here. And the guy literally, just adds that final stroke. And it's like, and that the story he was telling the kids is actually true. That this guy's really, you son of a bitch. And he stabs, that's the last time you stabbed me in the gut. And, but what a scene. I actually, just the emotion in that scene, and when he's coming around, and the fact that he's actually really sick, because he does go to the doctor at one point. I picked up on this the second time or third time I'd seen it, that the doctor's telling him, he's like, you're, the tests or whatever, you don't really know what he's talking about, but he's got a heart condition. And then of course, not spoiler alert, I don't know, whatever, but he does die of a heart attack at the end. And the only person with him is Ben Stiller, who, was, and that's a great scene. So, the movie is funny, but it's that kind of dramedy kind of thing, but it's the quirkiness of Wes Anderson that brings it, that gives it that sort of deadpan, sort of, sarcastic, type humor. Alec Baldwin doing the narration also is a nice touch. But it's just, it's such a one of his best perform. And I think it's probably that he only would make 2 movies after this. This would be it. And that's hard to believe. Like I'm watching, I realized, man, there was only 2 other films that he did, and then he retired.
Getting ready to suiting up to retire. Yeah, the quirky world of Wes Anderson. The static shots, the slow moving camera.
The exactness. Everything is perfect in the frame.
Yeah,
and Hackman. That was one of the most points that he got into really big argument, because he had the actor, the butler, the Pagoda, standing in front of the Statue of Liberty. Like the French Connection, there was a lot of really on location shooting in New York, but Wes Anderson set it up like it was sort of like a surreal version of New York, where you don't actually see all of the like the Empire State Building and all of the the landmarks. And this guy was standing in front of the statue, and he had a problem. Gene Hackman had a problem with that. Like, get out of the but he didn't get what Wes Anderson was doing. He did it on purpose. So, but just to be, and he
Yeah,
just, and he would go on to say, like, I don't get this movie. I don't get your style. It wasn't like
I still don't get his style.
It wasn't like the relationship that he had with Friedkin. With Friedkin he had the confidence. He was really young, but he had the confidence to back it up. This guy, he's fidgety, he's nervous, he's kind of Hackman's just like, I don't know, whatever. But he delivered.
Yeah, Wes Anderson is definitely an acquired taste, but I don't think he's that difficult to get into. He's not so.
No, I like his film.
He's not so avant-garde. He's it's more quirky. If you could watch Fabulous Mr. Fox and stuff like that, Isle of Dogs.
They filmed some of that in Yonkers. At Alder Manor right off Executive Boulevard, what's now Terrace Circle, right by the Foxfire School. That mansion. Yeah.
See, Yonkers.
There it is.
Great sets. Okay, our final film in this celebration of Gene Hackman is another double pick. It could have even been a triple pick because it was on my list, but I knew it was going to be grabbed. And like Eric said, Gene Hackman would only make two more films after Royal Tenenbaums. And
let's not. This is the last film. Let's just consider this.
By rights, in all honesty, this should have been his last film. They should have just
let's pretend it was
released it. But in 2003, he would do Runaway Jury, which is another scene-chewing Hackman performance. It's a great intrigue. It's a great film because it's anything that has to do with juries and trials are always intriguing. But this one, Sean and Christy picked it. You got John Cusack, Dustin Hoffman, Rachel Weisz, Bruce Davidson, Bruce McGill, Jeremy Piven, Nick Searcy, a whole bunch of character actors in it. Cliff Curtis, just a great ensemble cast, and then of course Gene Hackman is always in top form as Rankin Fitch, who is a jury fixer. So let's go with Sean. Sean, how did this make its appearance as your guilty pleasure fun one?
Well, when I was on my Hackman binge, this was available, and I'm like, Runaway Jury. I like this movie. I remember loving it when I first saw it, and I hadn't seen it since I think the first time I saw it. And I'm like, let me get back on this train. And I was riveted. I love the movie. I love his performance. Like what a bastard he was in this movie. I love
my jury.
Yeah. And he's getting outsmarted by these younger characters, who he screwed over. He doesn't know it yet. Spoiler alert, right? Yep. And I love the line where he tells John Cusack's character, he's like, I underestimated you. I don't normally do that. Just make sure you don't underestimate me. I love that line. It was very like trying to intimidate them. Yep. And just his presence, like even when he was defeated, like he never let them know it. Like he would let his team get all, curse them out, but he just was able to keep it cool with them. And I was watching something with him and Hoffman. They were talking about the fact that this was the first time they were acting together, and they felt a lot of pressure because I think Nick's favorite movie, Heat, there was the De Niro and Pacino scene, and they're like, oh my God, everybody was expecting this big thing. He's like, we didn't want to let people down. And he's like, they're making a big deal. He goes, it's just two old guys talking in a bathroom. What's the big deal? I thought that was funny. And I thought it was interesting what they were saying, that these two guys, one of the reasons why they've had success is because they've never lost that insecurity they had of being the guys that they thought were never going to make it. And I think that never left them, even though they had made it. I thought that was interesting how it informed their performances, and the fact that this is, according to Christie, Gene Hackman's last film.
Out of respect to Gene Hackman, we should recognize it as his last
watched
film.
Welcome to Mooseport for this binge, so I did see the unofficial.
I noticed it didn't make a list.
It was not on the. It was not going to be my fun pick, but I didn't want to. I didn't want the movie to end. I wanted it to, but it's like it was just.
Yeah. I'm going to hand it over to Christy, but it's just a fun film. It's fun. It moves at a breakneck pace.
Yeah.
It keeps you guessing that, you've got Gene Hackman who has infinite resources versus these other two people who are trying to game the system from the ground up. So there's a lot of intrigue. And so, Christy, why did it land on your guilty pleasure list?
I didn't see it in the theater. I saw it when it came out, and I've seen it numerous times. Like if this is one of those films, if it's on at any point, it stays on. I happen to like anything that has to do with courtroom drama. So like Lincoln Lawyer, I'll leave on. Like I'll just leave The Firm. I'll leave on another Gene Hackman.
Watch that too.
And John Grisham. It's a great cast. I love Hackman in it. Dustin Hoffman has some really good moments. The very last scene, that facial expression he gives when he realizes, yeah, you guys were on my side. It's great. But yeah, like it's like bad Gene Hackman, but he's not. But you don't hate him. Like he's not like evil. Like he is evil bad, but he's not like evil bad. It's. Corrupt. Although in the scene with Dustin Hoffman in the bathroom where he's just like, I think that's the scene where he's like, I just don't give a shit.
Yeah, and I never have.
He's like, and I never have. That's, maybe he is evil, which also is a great scene. And one of the things about that scene is like Sean said, is like they never actually acted together. And that scene wasn't originally in the script. So as they were filming it,
yes.
that scene was being written. And then Hackman and Hoffman had been done filming their stuff, so they came back to film that. And according to Dustin Hoffman, Hackman said to him when they were done, like he's like, "Let's go get drunk." He's like, "No, let's go get drunk," which is great. Like I mean, it's just like I love the fact that they still had that relationship that they that. But yeah, it's just a good film. It's the premise of it is sadly still relevant about we can't seem to agree on gun control in this country, and I mean it's not all of it's very plausible, but I don't care. I just I love watching this movie.
Yeah, I tried to get out of jury duty by saying I was taking the Madden challenge, and it didn't work.
It didn't work for Nick Easter either.
Yeah, I played that card as well, but the Madden challenge and Xbox didn't get me out of jury duty. Yeah, it's just one of those ones. And again, I think with jury duty and just all the films we've talked about it's such it's just so easy to watch Gene Hackman. Like he has there's just a natural thing about him, either whether it's his mannerisms, the way he uses his hands, like whatever he does to inhabit the character, it always feels genuine. Like I said, even when it's something as campy as Lex Luthor, you believe that he's this crazy guy that really just wants real estate, but there's a superhero. But
Dean, I think you said it, and it just makes perfect sense. Is Gene Hackman's comfort food.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was you that he really is. It's like he's just, it's not like he's like your uncle. Like I don't know. It's just he's just so comfortable to like watch.
Yeah. Regardless
of what he's doing, if he's being a prick, if he's being a hero, if he's being funny in the birdcage, which honorable mention. That's great.
Yep.
Sean, you should have picked Enemy of the State based on The Conversation. By the way,
I know.
Just to have them kind of just saying, but
spiritual people.
Like he's comfort food. He's like mac and cheese. I don't like mac and cheese, but people.
Me neither. But I think Eric was right. He makes any movie he's in better. The movie is watchable because Gene Hackman is in it.
He brings a humanity to every role.
Yeah.
He tried, like I said about the French Connection, he tries to find something good, even if it's an evil role, something like Little Bill Daggett and Unforgiven. It's like, you don't hate the guy, but he's brutal, but you understand where he's coming from though, if to a certain degree. And he's just a guy that wants to build a house. And he added, all of those layers and just sort of like makes these characters so much more fleshed out and more human, even if, you can't hate anybody. Any of the roles he plays, maybe something like The Firm, where he's just a very, that kind of stuff was just,
No, because he even
In the
has
end.
a redemption and
Yes.
like
Yeah.
redeeming qualities,
Yeah.
like right before he dies. Like
Mhm.
he has redeeming qualities even in that.
Yeah, even in like Unforgiven, where he's a villain in that, but his death scene is like, I just want to build a house. It's like, it's like, just let me be. And his death scene was one of the greats.
And yeah, just
Well, his scene with Richard Harris, we've talked about it in our Unforgiven episode, but his scene with Richard Harris are just two pros, like in the ring.
Oh my God,
with gloves on, just sparring, like those two just kind of going back and forth. The scene when in the jail, when he's in jail, and just all those scenes. It's he's just so, like, he can work with anybody. He can work with John Cusack, a young actor up and coming, and like I said, and be part of a crazy ensemble like Quick and the Dead. But then do something for Coppola, like The Conversation, and with those gritty early 70s where every city seemed like it was dirty.
Oh yeah.
Every city was ridden with litter, no matter how beautiful it was, and that grit, and he fit in with those as well, and he just moved through. He kind of moved through the decades, just kind of adapt, like he went with the flow. Like, he really didn't try and, I don't mean this in a bad way, he didn't try and reinvent the wheel. He took roles that he liked, or either for money or that he wanted to do. And like I said, each time he showed up and he performed and he did what he had to do.
We've said it so many times. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Nick.
I was saying, we've said it so many times. He never phoned it in. He was such a hard worker, but he made it seem so effortless, And I think the great thing about cinema is, like, he worked so many films that I bet you there's people out there who've never seen one of the Gene Hackman films, and they're going to see it for the first time because it's now forever on film. You can watch it on streaming. You could watch, so you'll discover a performance by Gene Hackman, and even if it was one of his lesser films, it was a great Gene Hackman performance.
Yeah. I don't know the guy personally, but he seems like when you watch his films, it seems like he's somebody Like, that's what there's a familiarity with Gene. Like, he seems.
Well, that's why he's comfort food.
He's somebody, like that. He's somebody's uncle, or like, he seems like he's somebody that like that, because he's just a very. Even in the roles he plays, you just feel like this is like a regular. Like, he seems like a regular guy. That's just.
He's also very normal looking.
Acts. Yeah, that's what it is. He's just kind of like,
he's very normal looking. If he wasn't Gene Hackman, and I don't mean this in a bad way, there's nothing very distinguishing about his look. He just looks like a guy. But because he's Gene Hackman and we know him, like, we know, obviously know who he is. But
all right. Any closing thoughts? Anybody have any? We'll go around once. Nick, anything in closing as we celebrate the life.
I mean, there's a bunch that we didn't mention, so I just think, go out there and, like, just check it out. Look up Gene Hackman and you'll find a bunch of movies that you probably haven't seen, and you should.
Yeah.
Scarecrow. We haven't mentioned Scarecrow. That's a great movie.
Another one. Yeah. Sean. Sorry.
An actor's actor. I think a guy who relied on training, I believe, and his craft and viewed it as a craft, and appreciative of the profession and the opportunities that he had. Maybe not always nice on set, as I'm learning, but was all about, I think, the work in the end, and the product, and being true and honest. And I think as an actor, that's what you want to be.
Yeah, Christy.
I think basically what Sean just said, act as actor, and again, maybe he could have been volatile at times, but if it was because of the passion he had for whatever he was doing, if it was difficult, it wasn't for the sake of being difficult. It was because, if he was doing something, he wanted it to mean something, and that's noble.
Absolutely.
And I just, I don't know. It's a tragic ending to a phenomenal life. I wish it had ended differently. I mean, we talked about at the beginning. The next few years are going to be very tough, based on a lot of the people in the music and film industry, which we've talked about on past podcasts. a lot of them are in their 80s and they're in their 90s, and
Getting up there.
there are some phenomenal, artists, both music and film, that it's going to be a rough decade.
Yeah.
So
A lot coming our way. Eric,
Absolutely.
final thoughts about this?
Egoless, human, just integrity. I think, those words best describe Gene Hackman. And I think, like Christy was saying, if he argued something, if he didn't agree with something, it was always for a reason. It had, the work speaks for itself in that regard, it just, you can never say, he didn't have a good time making this movie, but it's like, oh, well, you'll never be able to tell that in any of his performances, even if the movie is not that great. And I will miss him. Yeah.
I think we're all going to miss him. He was one of the good ones. There's a big discography. So in closing, let us know on social media, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, what was your favorite out of these? Is there one we missed, or what is one of your favorites, or something we should check out? Sean's got plenty of time on his hands, so he can certainly add to the, and as you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, he hasn't shaved in about a month because he's pulled up. He looks a little pale.
Shave, shower,
yeah. But I think that's going to do it. I think there was a well done, everybody, a way to really celebrate this wonderful actor who's, he's been retired for 20 years. I mean, that's the amazing thing about it too, is he went out, on his own. He said it's time, and he, like I said in the beginning, he had other interests and he pursued those. So he lived life on his own terms.
I think we got more out of him than we made. I always talked about him. I watched the interviews that he wanted to retire long before even 2004. So we got more out of him than we.
Yeah. Just in closing, I think in maybe it was 2011 or something, someone did an interview and said, Mr. Hackman is would you be open to doing another film? And he's like, yeah, I would, if we could film it in my house and nobody touches anything and they leave it the way it was.
That's great.
So there was that one opportunity, but it would be under very specific conditions. And that's going to do it for this episode of the 3324 podcast, celebrating the life and legacy of Mr. Gene Hackman. Sean Grady, thank you so much.
Thank you
for joining us and sharing your picks. And I love hearing why people pick the films they pick and what draws them to it. So it's always something special. Christy Cuomo, thank you so much as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for including me.
Yeah, and of course, Nick, the Professor Leshy, assistant to Mr. Lex Luthor. Mr. Luthor.
Thank you, Dean.
Oh, Nick, you should have put a bald cap on.
I should have. Missed opportunity. If Hackman didn't do it, I don't have to do it.
Well, there you go.
At least comb your hair funny.
And then,
it's always combed funny.
As always, Eric and I will be here each and every week with a new episode of the music and movies that shaped our lives. So for Sean, for Nick, for Christy, and for Eric, this has been Dean, thanking Mr. Gene Hackman for everything he's done for us. Thank you, kind sir, and good night.
You've been listening to the 3324 podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 podcast and on Twitter at 3324p to join the conversation.